Hello everyone. In this video, we will go over the book of Philemon and Hebrews. Philemon has only one chapter but contains such an important message. The book of Philemon is about reconciliation and relationship between Christians. We can see there are two main characters, which are Onesimus and Philemon. Onesimus was a slave of Philemon, and Onesimus had stolen from Philemon and ran away from him and met Paul while Paul was in prison. And he became a believer. And Paul wrote this letter to Philemon to accept Onesimus back but as a brother rather than a slave. Now let's go over the book of Hebrews. In this book, there's a clear theme which is superiority of Jesus. Throughout the book, we can see the comparisons, such as Jesus' superiority to angels, Moses, priests, sacrifices. The author begins with that God spoke to our ancestors in many different ways, but in these last days, God has spoken to us by His Son, Jesus Christ. And goes on to describe who Jesus is. It says in verse 3, chapter 1, He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of His nature, and He upholds the universe by the word of His power. So Jesus became flesh, and He is the word of God, and He is God because He is the exact imprint and radiance of God's glory. So there's a clear identity who Jesus is from the beginning of the book. The author compares Jesus with angels. Angels were the messengers of God who delivered the message of God. And people were called to pay attention to the law of God, but now we are called to focus on the message that was delivered by the Son of God, which is the gospel. So the point is that Jesus is superior to all messengers of God. Then we see the comparison between Moses and Jesus. Moses led Israelites and built a tabernacle, and Jesus is also a leader of all God's people, not just Israelites, and he is the creator of all things, not just a tabernacle. Just like Israelites were in the wilderness, we are also in wilderness that we must obey because Israelites were not obedient, that they didn't get a chance to enter into the promised land. So we must trust in God in this time of wilderness. Then we see the comparison between priests and Jesus. The priest's job was to offer sacrifice to atone for people's sin. However, the priest is not perfect either. They also sinful people. So they had to sacrifice for their sins and other people's sin every time. But Jesus, who is perfect and sinless, became the sacrifice and to atone for everyone's sin once and for all. And this sacrifice was done at the cross. Jesus' death on the cross was the ultimate sacrifice, which is far greater than all the animal sacrifices. This sacrifice had to be done regularly, but Jesus had to do it only once for all and was sufficient to cover the sins of the world. So in Jesus, there is the good news. Jesus is the hope. Jesus is the great priest. Jesus is the perfect sacrifice. And Jesus is the Messiah. And the believers must follow His way and remain faithful in Jesus Christ only. Faith is the key, and we see several examples in the last few chapters of Hebrews of faithful believers in the Bible. And that is what the book of Hebrews is about.